Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. She was known as society's best kept secret, but it wasn't until years after she designed and made Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress that she got the credit she ultimately deserved. This week on the 302, we are at Winterthur for a very special show, taking a look at the life, the legacy, and the dresses of Ann Lowe, America's first haute couture African-American designer. Get ready, the 302 is headed your way. If you're not familiar with American fashion designer Ann Lowe, there is a reason for that. Lowe grew up in the Jim Crow South at a time when African-American business people and fashion designers, for that matter, didn't get the opportunities or the credit they deserved. Lowe is now the subject of a new exhibit at Winterthur called Ann Lowe American Couturier. I'm joined now by Elizabeth Way. She is the associate curator at the Museum of the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, when you walk into this exhibit, it blows your mind. The first dress really sets you up for what you're going to be seeing. It's beautiful, and so is all of the work of Ann Lowe, but unfortunately, she didn't get the credit she deserves. Tell us a little bit about her humble beginnings.
So Ann Lowe grew up in a family of dressmakers in Clayton, Alabama. She was born at the end of the 19th century. We're not even 100% sure of her birthday, kind of considering the record keeping at that time. But her grandmother had been an enslaved woman, but she was also an incredible dressmaker. She earned her freedom, and she trained Ann Lowe's mother and then later Ann Lowe in these very advanced dressmaking techniques.
Now, Ann Lowe says she got her first challenge, unfortunately, whenever her mother passed, and there was a big commission that had to be done. She was about 14, 16 years old in Alabama. Tell us about that.
So this was in 1916. It was right before New Year's Eve, and the governor of Alabama, his wife, was a big client of theirs, and she was throwing a big ball. And so there was an order of dresses that had to be complete, but Janie Lowe, Ann Lowe's mother, died very suddenly. So as a teenager, Ann Lowe finished this really large commission, and she talks about in interviews, like, that was the real first test I had in my life, and completing that gave me a lot of confidence. I knew that I could do this.
And there's another pivotal moment in her life where she's in a department store and she's approached by a woman named Josephine Lee.
So Ann Lowe got married very, very young, and her husband didn't want her to work. So she gave up dressmaking, but she was still making her own clothes. And a woman named Josephine Lee, who is from Tampa, Florida, the wife of a citrus businessman, saw her and saw the amazing ensemble that she was wearing. And she asked her, "Where did you get this?" And Ann Lowe said, "I made it." And she hired her on the spot to come to Tampa and be a live-in dressmaker for her and her 4 daughters.
And that really was a pivotal moment because that's when people started to realize just the talent that she had. And she didn't use patterns, right?
No, she draped right on the form, and she cut her fabric from there.
So the family loved her work so much, and she had all these guests or customers in the community, and she thought, I want to take this a step further. She had her eyes on fashion school in New York.
Absolutely. So she spent 1917, a few months during that year, in fashion school. The Lee family supported her, but when she got there, she was actually segregated away from the rest of the students. The schoolmaster didn't know that she was Black when she applied. So they put her in a separate room, but her skills were so advanced that very soon the other students were coming in to look at her work, look at the caliber of her work, and she actually graduated in half the time.
Now, there were a lot of roadblocks because she was an African-American woman in a business that was dominated by white men, right?
Absolutely. She really transitioned from what we think of as a dressmaker to what we think of as a fashion designer just because of the time she was working in. But by the 1960s, when she was finally getting the credit she deserved, we really had moved to a system where we have so many male fashion designers in New York. And most people are designing ready-to-wear, and she specialized in couture. which means every dress was made to order to fit specifically the woman it was made for.
So she would look at magazines, or she would even go to Paris to look at some of the designs and bring them back and share them with the elite of high society.
Absolutely. So she went to Paris in 1949 to cover the haute couture shows. She was sent by a newspaper called the New York Age. So she was very, very aware of what was happening in Paris because that was influencing American fashion on all levels. But her clients also had ideas about what they wanted, especially if it was for their wedding dress, and she would work with them one-on-one to, bring her creativity and meld it with their wants and create the perfect dress.
Now, one of her signatures are these little flowers, some cases big flowers, that she learned how to make whenever she was a small child with scraps.
So this is her origin story. She talks about being 6 years old in the garden and copying the flowers out of the fabric scraps from her mother and her grandmother's dresses. So she, we think about the 10,000 hours it takes to learn something. She got that by the time she was a teenager. She started really young.
So she would put these on dresses all the way through her career. And when she would make these dresses, sometimes she didn't always make money on them, right?
Unfortunately, she wasn't very interested in the business aspects of her dress. What she really loved was the creativity and the beauty of fashion. So sometimes her clients would kind of bargain her down for the prices, and she talks about how, she really should have stripped away some of the details to make the dress fit the cost, but she loved the design so much. Sometimes, after it was sold, she realized she put in way more money into it than she got from it.
And it also took a toll on her health. I mean, she had issues with her eyesight.
Absolutely. She lost one of her eyes to surgery in the mid-60s, and then she had a very risky surgery on her remaining eye to remove cataracts. But by the end of her career, in 1972, she was almost blind.
That's amazing. You think about all the barriers that she had throughout her career and her life, and she's able to create these absolutely fabulous dresses that you could wear today.
Absolutely. She made beautiful special event gowns, and she made these gowns for elite women. So they're special gowns made for these women who are really well connected, and so we're really lucky that they ended up in museum collections or private collections so we could display them now.
And these are gowns that she also worked under labels like Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus. I mean, she was just at the pinnacle of her career in the 60s and the 70s?
The 1950s and the 1960s were really the high point of her career, and when she was finally starting to get a bit of press.
That's good. Well deserved after all those years.
Absolutely.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much. When we return, we're going to take a look at some of these gowns up close and hear some of the stories behind them.
I'm Justin Day from Jessup's Tavern, and I love the vittles on the 302.
Welcome back. We are at Winterthur talking about American fashion designer Ann Lowe. I'm joined by Alexandra Deutsch, who is the Director of Collections here at Winterthur. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's great to talk to you, Jackie.
So let's talk a little bit about the beautiful dresses that you have throughout the exhibit. The first one you see is a showstopper. It's beautiful. It's got all these crystals. Talk to me about, just the history behind it.
So it's one of our fantasy dresses that were a category of these remarkable gowns that Ann Lowe would make for different events. And that particular event took place in Nebraska. It's called Axar Bend. And it was this grand ball, and that was one of 32 gowns that she was commissioned to make through Saks Fifth Avenue. And we call it the Glinda dress because it looks like Glinda from The Wizard of Oz, and it just sparkles. And the wearer loved it so much that after she wore it to Axar Bend, she made it her wedding gown. And that's not the only instance of women who wore their Lowe gowns for an event and then later wore them again because they loved them so much.
I know there's an instance of one of the gowns that was dyed because you got to hang on to, you got to be able to wear it more than once.
Keep wearing your Ann Lowe.
Absolutely. Now, the most famous gown that she made was, of course, the gown we have here.
Yes.
And that's the wedding dress for Jackie Kennedy.
Yes, so Winterthur was able to work with the JFK Library to copy the original, which had been exhibited for so long, it actually can no longer be exhibited. And we wanted to make the first accurate copy of it in textile. It had been reproduced by a paper artist years ago, but working with the University of Delaware and a woman named Couturier, and then Kate Samuel, who heads our textile conservation department. They went to the JFK library, took minute measurements and photos. They worked for several days. And then Couturier came back to her studio here, not at Winterthur, but her own studio. And she, with 3 other students from University of Delaware, recreated to the smallest detail Jacqueline Kennedy's wedding gown.
So when we look at this, it has a lot of the things that Anne Lowe was famous for, the flowers and the sort of ruffle at the hem. Can you talk about that?
So there are signature elements, both inside the gown and outside the gown, that are Anne Lowe. This incredible manipulation of fabric to make the sculptures. So you have the rosettes on the skirt. In the center of the rosettes were orange blossoms. And I think that really goes to the fact that Anne Lowe had this old-fashioned sensibility that she brought to her gowns as well, that she had inherited that knowledge from her grandmother and her mother. The Jackie gown, it's said that Ambassador Kennedy took a really heavy hand in wanting this opulent, sort of old South vibe to the gown. And so the skirt alone has upwards of 50 yards of fabric.
Wow.
And this incredible sculptural detail work in the bodice. So a lot of things that say they're Lowe, and then on the inside, this incredible structured bodice, so that a woman wearing any Lowe gown, whether you were Jackie Kennedy or another woman, didn't have to wear anything else. They just could put on the gown, it would fit them perfectly, and it would be entirely customized inside for them.
Now, there was a little drama in the making of this dress that caused a redo.
Yes, so Jacqueline Bouvier at that time wanted something made by a Parisian designer. She was a Francophile. She wanted something that was the height of French fashion, but it was considered very important by the Kennedys that it be an American designer. And Anne Lowe had worked with the Bouvier family for many, many years. She had made gowns for Jackie and for her sister and their mother. So going to an American designer was something that was important, but it said that Jackie Kennedy did not particularly like her gown, and later when she was asked, said it was a colored dressmaker and didn't call out Anne Lowe when she could have.
And
Yeah.
Anne Lowe took issue with that and wrote her a letter, right?
She did. She took major issue with it, and we'll never really know the ins and outs of all that story. But when you look at photos of Anne Lowe's studio, she always had the framed photo of Jacqueline Kennedy in the wedding gown, because it was her most important commission. And she had had a lot of tragedy associated with the commission. She had just finished the commission, not only the wedding gown, but the bridesmaids. And then there was a tragic flood in her studio, and almost all of the pieces were ruined. And so in less than 2 weeks, she had to remake the entire commission using her own money to pay extra seamstresses, but also to buy the fabric. And at the last minute, she got on that train to Newport and was able to deliver the wedding party and the wedding gown. When she arrived at the house, she was told to go to the back entrance. And she said, "You can either have the gowns or I will walk through this front door."
Good for
and
her.
she walked through the front door.
Absolutely. Now, Jackie Kennedy is not the only high society. You had the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Posts, and there's also a beautiful gown by a woman named Mance, who was a pianist. Is that right?
Yes. So there were clients that Anne Lowe maintained relationships with and made numerous pieces for, who were in the Black community. And Elizabeth Mance was a famous pianist. Her father was a very prominent doctor, and she created not only Elizabeth Mance's wedding gown and gowns for the wedding party, but this incredible concert gown for Elizabeth Mance. And the way she designed it, it was designed intentionally so that when Elizabeth Mance was seated at the piano, the whole drape and the bow and the details and the sparkle of the beading would be shown off when she sat down.
So much thought went into her designs and the way people would perceive the gowns.
Yes, and that she also prided herself on obviously not only making every woman look their most beautiful, but that no two Anne Lowe gowns were the same. So it's the essence of couture, is that knowing the client, knowing exactly what will look well on them, knowing how they're going to wear it, and just that thoughtfulness, even down to the backs of so many of her gowns are magnificent. In some cases, the fronts are beautiful, but the backs are magnificent, and that's because when you're going to a ball or you're at your debut or you're at your wedding, often photos are taken from behind, and so she wanted those views to be absolutely stunning, and you really see that. So quite a few of the gowns we have in this show are actually seen from the back.
So much to see, Alexandra. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
And when we come back, we're going to talk more about American fashion designer Anne Lowe.
My name is Nick. I am from Delaware, and I get my nature and history groove on with the 302.
Welcome back. We're joined now by Kim Collison. She is the curator of exhibitions here at Winterthur. And Kim, I wanted to ask you, I know Winterthur does so many amazing exhibits, but this exhibit was special for you because of who, I guess, came up with the idea and really laid the groundwork.
Yeah, so a former colleague of mine, Margaret Powell, she was here several years ago at Winterthur as a cataloger, and she had done her graduate thesis on Anne Lowe. Unfortunately, Margaret died in 2019, but after a series of conversations, Winterthur was able to carry this exhibition idea forward, and it's a great honor for us to be honoring her legacy, but also honoring Lowe's legacy and the research that Margaret started on this project.
Now, when we talk about research, a lot of people may not understand when they come and they see it set up so beautifully that you had to reach out to not one, not two, but almost a handful, a dozen maybe, organizations to bring this all together. How many different museums are involved here?
At least a dozen museums and private lenders as well. So lots of people contributed to this exhibition. There are several relations to Lowe, as well as people whose family wore Lowe that continue to be interested in her work and have shared their stories with us.
And this is the perfect place to exhibit it all because some of it has been tucked away forever or maybe wasn't taken care of the way a museum would have done it. So because you are a museum that has the capabilities to restore, this was the perfect place, right?
Yeah, Winterthur was well positioned to do this exhibition for a number of reasons. We're a place that tells these untold stories about craft and making. So it was a nice place to do that. But as you mentioned, many of these dresses were in ill repair or hadn't been conserved in the collections they were in. And our conservation department here was able to work on many of the dresses. We also have a partnership with the University of Delaware. So they were very supportive in this exhibition. All the mannequins were custom made there. So that was a great collaboration. And it's really just been a wonderful opportunity that has brought many people together. Some of the dresses we conserved, for instance, brought new techniques about, and conservators have really had wonderful opportunities to try new work. For instance, there is a very early dress that Lowe made. It's probably early 1930s, and it had lace on it that had been discolored over the years. So we had a postgraduate conservation fellow work on that project and really bring the dress back to what it would have looked like. There's another dress that's really great, it has feathers on it, and our conservators learned how you curl feathers and dye them to match the originals and really bring it back to what it would have looked like when someone wore it in Lowe's day.
Now, restoring a dress like one of these is one thing, but you have to put it on a good foundation, because it's not so much the dress itself and the flourishes, but there's a lot of construction underneath a lot of these that I would imagine you had to be very careful with and display it in a certain way.
Yeah, so Lowe's dresses are really fantastically built in terms of their interior structure. That was one of the things she was known for. But a dress is meant to be worn for a day or an evening. Mm-hmm. These dresses we have on mannequins for 3 to 4 months here for this exhibition. So it's very important that we build a structure to support them, particularly those that are fragile. And that's the work that our conservators really do. And that's where we designed these custom mannequins, and they did all the understructures and everything in order to support them for this time.
I wanted to take a deep dive into the legacy, because in her lifetime, because she was African American, she was not given opportunities, she was passed over in terms of credit, and it really was a struggle for her. But she laid the groundwork for so many African American designers today, and that's basically what we have happening behind us here, is her legacy. Talk to me a little bit about, just the inspiration that she put out there.
Right. As you said, she didn't get the credit she was due for much of her life. Later in her life, she did get some press. And so we featured in the exhibit here, we wanted to talk about the legacy of her work. So we have 6 African-American designers that are featured here. Saul, who is a wedding dress designer. B. Michael, who is a true couturier in Ann Lowe's legacy, and working with a range of people, custom designing gowns for them. Bishme Cromartie, who was one of the Project Runway winners, as well as Kimberly Goldson, Dapper Dan, and Tracy Reese. So all of these contemporary designers tell a slightly different story in terms of how their stories relate to Lowe. But what we really wanted to do was talk about those continued struggles as an African-American designer. And we'll be hosting a whole symposium actually in October, really focusing on contemporary fashion and Lowe's legacy.
I wanted to talk about, it's not a lame, gold lame, but it's just this beautiful gold dress that was part of the Met Gala. Can you tell us a little bit about, just the homage of this dress?
Yeah, it's a very important dress made by B. Michael, for the 2021 Met Gala. Dawn Davis wore it to the gala, and among the names on the dress are Ann Lowe and Elizabeth Keckley, 2 of the people that Elizabeth Way has written about, our curator, and as well as a number of other African-American designers. And this was a request that Dawn Davis wore these people to the Met Gala with her. They had not been recognized at the gala or had the opportunity to go themselves, so she carried them with her.
And finally, the Bevy Smith dress with the cape. I mean, that is, we start the show with a showstopper and we end the show with a showstopper.
Yeah, it is really fabulous. The cape was made by Dapper Dan. It has his name on the back of it among the fabulous floral embellishments that are there. And it's also talking about sort of the idea of really designing for the occasion and the person. Most people, when they saw this cape, would not recognize it as Dapper Dan's work per se, but he designed this for the occasion of her to go with him to the Met Gala in 2019, and it really is something special.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Aren't these dresses beautiful? If you happen to come down and check out the exhibit, make sure you snap a couple of pictures and share them with us on Facebook. Now, here are some other things you might want to check out. more information on the Ann Lowe exhibit or any of the exhibits here at Winterthur, be sure to check out winterthur.org. That'll do it for this week's episode of the 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook for some really amazing behind-the-scenes content you're just not going to get anywhere else. We're going to leave you now with a beauty shot of the DuPont koi pond just outside. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on the 302.